argued that student politics is completely pointless. There's nothing which will engage students, and we don't really need politics anymore, especially for students. Do you accept that?
That's a really good question. I can see why some people might feel like that, because it's often difficult to communicate what exactly it is that students' unions are up to. But I think actually it's a really important challenge to take up. And I'm going to try to do it right now. Student unions are key in three kind of obvious regards. One is internally, in terms of the running of the union. The union is actually really important to lots of students when they come here, and they get the support and the help and the social life that comes with the union. And actually student officers and student union council are really important in terms of running the union itself. Second thing is the running of the university. Student officers are embedded in the governance structure of the university, and depending on our ability to develop relationships and make our cases for what it is that we think the university should be doing, we can have a really significant influence on the overall strategic running of the university, and that's pretty key for students. The third thing, which is actually the one that's perhaps more contentious and where your question I think is coming from, is how students impact upon the wider environment, and essentially how students are able to campaign for their issues, right? And I think one of the feelings that says to people that maybe it doesn't matter is that we don't always seem to win. And that's kind of an understatement. It often seems like students on a national level don't manage to get what it is they want. And I think that's just one of the truths, if you like, of any interest group or any particular subgroup. It's very difficult to actually convince the majority of a nation to listen to your particular concerns. However, the very fact that actually students come together and try to make their voices heard means that we manage to push back the balance on decisions that are being made. So it might not mean that we win totally and we get everything we want, but actually because we're part of the discussion, make sure that those decisions that are made are more in the interest of students than they would have been otherwise. And I think that's the kind of thinking we've got to engage in when we're actually thinking about the value of student politics.
Is it all just about funding, or is there more?
The essential topic on which we should come back to is that students are citizens, and in that sense students actually are part of the wider economic and political environment. So the first issue that comes up is the increase in the price of life. It's as simple as that. Students essentially get pretty much the same kind of loans they've been getting for the last 3 years. There's not been any significant increase. The jobs that are available out there are less of them, and they pay less, broadly speaking, than they did just a few years ago. And the price of life just keeps going up. I don't know if you've been following, but the price of food is at historic heights, and so is the price of energy. Everybody needs to eat, including students, and everybody needs to heat themselves and this kind of stuff, right? So that's kind of the broader perspective, actually. Students are citizens, and the price of life is the major issue which affects students in every possible way. But that sort of translates into a bunch of different things. And one key thing that comes with that is actually worries about graduate employability. Because the price of life is going up, because there's scarce resources, people are starting to worry about what kinds of jobs they're going to get when they finish. And that's really one of the key issues that both the university and the students' unions have been working on, is actually trying to essentially set up a system where it becomes more and more easy for people to get jobs when they finish their degree. The other key aspect of this actually is about resources for the university. Since the general price of things are going up, the university needs to be able to be clever in terms of how it distributes resources, and it needs to do it efficiently, and that means high quality teaching for students when they come here. The other obvious issue is international students. I don't know if you've heard, but the Home Office has quite strange plans that they're trying to implement to reduce the number of international students and make it difficult for them to stay in the country after they finish their degrees, which would cost universities themselves a significant amount of money, but actually cost the overall British economy in the billions. So I'm not too sure why the Home Office wants to do this, since it's clearly economically going to be the deficit of this country. So, but these are kind of the issues that are coming up and that we need to address.
On a personal level, do you think that it's kind of frustrating that it's just been taken over by tuition fees rather than these other issues?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of the really frustrating aspects of, I think, being involved in politics, broadly speaking, is that a lot of what you do goes unnoticed, and a lot of the good stuff that you actually are able to do is not necessarily of interest to the media, which is the most important way of getting your message out there. So, fees and cuts have been a massive issue, but actually even here in Sheffield there's significant issues around HMOs, housing with multiple occupancy, and around the council's take on this. And it's very difficult to get anything out there in the media and actually raise this issue. Say, look, this is really important and please look into us, we're going to talk about this. Whereas, when there's something that takes national attention in the media, they're more than happy to report on it. So it's very difficult to manage that.
The new model proposed by the Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition has been condemned by the NUS, by our union, by most students, 90% or something along those lines. Do you think that it is still, nonetheless, a stepping stone towards a fairer system of education? Is it fairer than the new model, than the old model under New Labour?
Interesting question. First, the Students' Union takes its stance not from the opinion of officers, but from a policy which was actually passed by referendum 2 years ago. So we have, our policy is in favor of free education. Actually, it's pretty clear. It says that we should campaign for the abolition of any kind of fees, and that we should really make sure that there's as much help for poor students to come to university. So my main concern actually in all of this is that the newer model, I think, is very much likely to deter poor students from coming to university, and in the long run might actually change quite radically the kind of population who come to university. And that's a real concern. That's you really have to worry about that, because university does fundamentally change the lives of people. It increases their capacity to earn and generally to take part in society. So this is a really significant concern when you say we're going to charge people £9,000 a year. Are you still willing to come to university? My personal experience, actually, I've done a lot of work in Broome Hall in terms of outreach, so I know a lot of kids who are from poor backgrounds. A lot of them are refugees who are now British because they've been here a long time. And they were very keen on coming to university last summer, and they've told me straight up, no longer, now it's just unthinkable. Even though I explained to them, but you won't have to pay up front, and depending on how much you earn, you'll have to pay back or not, and so on and so forth. It takes really a lot of convincing and a lot of time spent explaining to people the full depth of the system for it to really hit home. So I'm just really worried about how this is going to play out in practice.
So those people that you've worked with, what do they think is the best form? Do they think it's also a complete abolition of fees?
It's a very good question. I think it's mixed. I think just like in the student population, even younger people have the same mix of views, that maybe there's some degree where it makes sense to have some graduate contribution because you do get benefits. And some other people think education is a right and it should just be free. So I think that debate's still ongoing in young people's minds.
And personally, what do you think is the best form?
It's a very good question. My personal view is actually that this is strictly personal, so not in speaking in the name of the union, which is important to make a distinction.
Yeah, sure.
Is that actually within the circumstances we're in, a graduate tax would be a step in the right direction. And the main reason for this is because you would be able to essentially have a system where the funding of higher education would be safeguarded. It would make it foolproof depending on the government. Essentially means the government wouldn't have so much say on how much money goes to universities. But it would mean that the state would own the debt, right? And therefore the interest that accumulates on that debt. So people would only pay when they're able to afford it, and people will come to university on the basis of what they actually want to study and their capacity to study, not on the basis of their ability to pay. So those are the kind of things that I'm looking at.
In the past 12 months, we've seen students take to the street, protesting continuously. Like in Sheffield, we've seen it in London. There's more protests in Manchester and further ones in London. Do you believe that our generation will come to define student politics?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. But I think that our generation needs to come to define our own generational concerns, and I think that's actually the broader issue. Even though student politics right now is, in a way, capturing national attention, the bigger issue is that actually as a generation we face a fundamental shift in outlook. We know that the economy is not going to get better anytime soon. We know that the environment is going to mean some serious changes in our habits of consumption and in our outlook for prosperity. If you look at even the changes in pension schemes and so on and so forth, this is really going to affect even more strongly young people than it's going to affect 50-year-olds. So, the issue here is actually about our generation gaining a consciousness that we are the people who are going to be asked to pay for the mistakes of our parents. And that means we need to really think very carefully about how we think that should be done.